This panel is about artificial intelligence, and it's quite a buzz right now. And frankly, I started working with an AI company earlier last year, and it was quite an eye-opener for myself, even though as much time as Armstrong Associates spends analyzing the market. I think AI has definitely it's got a lot of ability to disrupt this market, and we're going to talk about that this morning. We have a lot of great panelists to help get further detail and expansion on how AI is going to be used, how it is being used, and kind of what the future looks like applying artificial intelligence to domestic transportation management operations. If each of you could kind of just talk a little bit about yourselves, your company as an intro, that'd be great. So, Parker, you want to kick it off?
Sure. My name is Parker. I'm the CEO at Parade.ai. Parade.ai, we are a workflow automation company, but you can also just call us a freight broker. So we leverage the technology that we're developing internally to increase the efficiency and productivity of our operations team. And our philosophy is that instead of trying to get carriers and customers to change their behaviors, install new systems, download new apps, we just want to work in their existing workflows. And so, we think that behavior enhancement, like using virtual assistants to be able to automate the tender process, the rate con process, the ETA updates through email, text message, phone call, is a better way to bring technology in the market than asking people to change the way they're working today.
Okay, great. Tony, how about you guys?
Hey, yeah, my name is Tony. I'm the CTO of Parade, and Parade is a technology company that is helping brokers collect and utilize data on their customers and their carriers to help improve the carrier experience and also help improve their carrier relationships. And I come from more of a tech background, so I just recently entered this whole space around 4 years ago. And it's been really interesting to see the kinds of problems that, exist in this industry coming from, working from companies like Facebook and Google to this, where you really see similar strategies and similar approaches to problems. And it's been an eye-opener, and it's been a really amazing ride working with people in this industry.
Drew, you want to talk about Transfix?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Drew McElroy. I'm the founder and CEO of Transfix. Transfix is a digital freight broker. We founded the company in 2013. We're based in New York City. There's about 175 of us. We've been fortunate enough to raise about $80 million in capital. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Matt?
I thought you forgot about me, Evan. Yeah, Matt Bernstein, CEO of HubTran. At HubTran, we automate back office work for transportation companies and 3PLs and brokers in particular, as well as factoring companies. So when I talk about back office work, think payables, document management, document retrieval, customer invoicing, etc.
And I'm Evan Armstrong, president of Armstrong Associates. We're best known for the top 3PL lists we do with Transport Topics and a lot of the other different trade magazines, along with our own lists. We also do a lot of 3PL strategy work, which involves helping 3PLs digitalize their operations these days. We do M&A advisory work, and we also still help shippers find 3PLs to work with. So we're very niched in our research and our consulting. So let's kick it off. I have some questions, and at some point somebody's going to hand me an iPad so we can get the questions from the audience as well. How are your companies applying AI to logistics? Which areas do customers have the most interest in automating? And Tony, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Evan. I think the one problem that most people in this room are trying to solve is how can we give our employees more intelligence and better operational efficiency so that they can work smarter and be more productive. But before we dive into the current AI solutions that tackle these problems, I think we need to look at companies that are industry leaders in already utilizing technology and artificial intelligence within their organizations. So I think we can look at companies such as JB Hunt 360, which is already investing $500 million into building their own technology platform, or even companies such as Uber Freight. And the commonality that we see in these companies is that they really have a sound, well-built data infrastructure. And they understand that without data, there really is no AI. And I see, and a common mistake that we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen as well, Ivan, is that business executives tend to go into a buying decision trying to find an AI solution that solves problems X, Y, and Z within their organization without realizing that AI is really not an out-of-the-box solution. So trying to build and implement AI within your organization without having a solid data infrastructure is similar to building a skyscraper without having a solid foundation underneath first. And so even with the largest brokerages, we've seen 90% of their data not being stored, just being dropped and leaked through these data cracks, like we like to call them. And I think once companies start collecting and understanding their customers and their carriers, similar to how Amazon collects data on us and learns how we behave, that's when we can start seeing AI really plug in and being implemented and learning from the existing data that exists within these brokerages. And we've really seen AI solutions being plugged into every step of the end-to-end freight, digital freight matching process, including pricing, including automatic carrier assignment, including automated carrier engagement, supply and demand forecasting, and so on.
No, I think that's a good point, just to kind of put an emphasis on what Tony said there. Even if you're using a tier 1 TMS, you're still not capturing a lot of the data that's really going to help the AI in terms of load matching and automating your processes. And I know you guys have spent a lot of money on your systems at Transfix, Drew, so you want to talk a little bit about how you're applying AI to logistics?
Sure. I would say the first thing is I'm going to try very hard to not use any buzzwords on this panel, because I think, if you call up your TMS provider and you're like, I need some of that AI, you're going to be like, okay, here you go, here's the bill, right? I mean, you have to have a philosophical orientation as an organization toward data. You can't just say, okay, if we get that and plug it in, we'll be better. It has to be how you think about the world and how you do business. And at least in our case, there's two kind of primary tranches that exist in. One, which you started to allude to a little bit, is actually kind of boring, but incredibly important, which we would just categorize as the automation of processes. Everything from receiving the tender, pricing a load, whether it's on a contract or on the spot market, track and trace, collect the POD, bill it and pay it, all that good stuff should, by and large, be automated. And of course, what that does is it dramatically reduces your cost to process a transaction and therefore makes your gross to net ratio that much better. And you don't find yourself in trouble by somebody who can have a higher net than your gross and things like that. So certainly, the more you can take cost out of a transaction, the better you'll be prepared to compete. I think the old days of 15 to 18% gross margins and 1.5 to 3% EBITDA, i.e. 12% transaction processing costs, I think that's a recipe for disaster. So certainly the degree to which you can use data and other forms of technology to automate processes is critical. The other way that we think about it, which to me is actually a little bit more interesting, so we've built and deployed our own mobile application. And so to your point about some TMSs don't collect data, we're pinging about 65,000 drivers between every 60 and 120 seconds. And so we're understanding not just where they are, but where they're going. And as you start to collect this data, you can build very quickly patterns of life and patterns of preferences on drivers without them having to give you the information. You can just begin to intuit it. And as you can do that, then we pull everything back. And when we cover loads, we don't cover a load with a phone call, hey, there's a driver, let me call him up. We cover many loads with many trucks. And it's a constantly optimized set of loads and trucks pairs to optimize for empty mileage and dwell time. And when you optimize those things, i.e. you minimize them, you put more money into drivers' pockets directly. And you don't do it through increasing the rate per mile. You do it through increasing the number of miles. And all of a sudden you have a much more attractive solution to that set of carriers, because you can literally say to them, if you work with us at the end of the week, don't worry about the rate per mile. Don't worry about the rate on this individual lane. At the end of the week, you will put more revenue to that truck, more revenue to that driver. And the reality is, on a per mile basis, because they're getting so many more miles, on a per mile basis, it actually lowers the rate. And so when you can have a lower procurement price and a lower cost to operate, and all of the, the bells and whistles, that visibility and all the things like that go along with it, when we come to the shipper we feel like we have an incredibly compelling value proposition.
Very good. Matt, how are you applying AI to logistics?
Sure.
What do your customers like about you?
Yeah. So just to recap, AI generally can do two things. As you mentioned, it can discern patterns and relationships that human beings may not be able to see easily, and it can automate work, repetitive work typically. And it's that second piece that we focus on for our customers, who are primarily freight brokers and 3PLs. So if you think about paperwork coming in from your carriers on a daily basis, if you're like most brokers, you have people who are looking at that paperwork, matching up to the load, making sure that they're indexing the rate con and invoices separately from the bills of lading and lumber receipts and scale tickets. Finding the load ID, invoice number, amount. HubTran, through the use of AI and, other, strategies, is able to, automate all of that work and, understand where there are discrepancies. When you have somebody who's doing that, a human being as dedicated as they are, repetitive work is both slower, but also, tends to be more error prone. So, anytime you can, use machines to do that type of repetitive work, you're not only taking out cost, you're improving accuracy and speed.
Parker?
Thanks. So I just want to take a second and back up and get on the same page about what AI means. It's a moving target. And, it's been around, the term was coined in the 1950s. And John McCarthy, that guy who coined the term, he would say, as soon as it works, no one calls it AI anymore. So back in the 50s and 60s, a calculator was considered AI, something that only humans could do. And as we've progressed through different peaks and troughs of AI coming to the forefront, it's mean different things. So, today it means anything that emulates what a human can do. And that might be pattern matching, that might be vision, that might be speech, and it might be making recommendations. And so it's quite the moving target. We define it artificial intelligence based off of emulating human intelligence. Well, people have been talking about, what is human intelligence for millennia? Unlike, the mobile era or the desktop era, those are pretty easily defined based off of the toolkit, the mobile app, the desktop. And so AI is a very, very broad term. But when you think about it in the best way it's deployed today, it is in those pattern recognition and in those recommendations. So the company that I look up to the most as far as AI is concerned is Netflix. Netflix takes your past behaviors, what you've watched, and makes a recommendation about what you will watch next. Similar to 15 years ago, your brother-in-law might have known that you liked action movies, and he suggests that you go see the next Rambo. And so it's about knowing someone deeply and knowing someone personally and being able to recommend something that might add value to their particular life. And so as we think about projecting that into the transportation landscape, it's a lot about identifying the patterns and preferences of carriers as well as shippers. And I'll give you one example of how we leverage the AI toolkit. And so instead of trying to be the first person to call a trucker who just posted something in Tallahassee, it's about noticing that every third Tuesday, some small trucking company has 2 trucks in Tallahassee, and then 2 days later, 2 trucks in Des Moines. And what does that mean for your shipper, and how can you leverage that pattern and behavior to reach out to them the day before? And so as we, think about continuing to, build out technologies, it can't just be about what the toolkit is or what the buzzword is or, what the pattern is. It's about making recommendations both to your internal operations team, to your customers, to your carriers, about how their workflow and how their lives can be more valuable and contributing to their success.
Very good. My next question gets involved in how AI is going to interact with humans. So How well do you think AI can replicate or improve upon human decision making? For example, automating carrier selection and load matching. And Drew, you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. That's actually a question that's near and dear to my heart. When we first started to exist, there were plenty of, I would call, large and more traditional brokers who would love to say, "Oh, that's never going to work. This is a relationship-driven business, and you can't take the humans out of the business." I would actually agree with that. I would say that there are things that humans are much better at than machines, and that is, for the most part, working with other humans. And so in our business, both on the account side and on the carrier side, everyone has a human point of contact. And, if they are lonely, or if their truck bursts into flames, or the pallets fall off the dock, or whatever it might be, they can call somebody and say, "Hey, we've got a significant situation here, help." And that human is empowered on our side to do all sorts of things. The trick is to not use humans where the machines are better. And the machines, as we've already kind of been talking about, generally are better than humans at two things. One, doing the same thing over and over and over again. That is a very, obviously, boring thing to do. And to everyone else's point, no matter how dedicated humans are, they're not as fast as machines, and they inherently will make some mistakes. It's just the nature of humans. And machines don't do that. And machines don't get tired, and they don't, go on strike and all sorts of things. So processing things, machines are better at than humans. The other thing that machines are better at than humans is looking at vast quantities of data and making quantitative decisions based on that data. And at least in brokerage, that relates to a few different things. Certainly pricing. I can sit here and tell you with absolute confidence, machines are better at pricing truckloads than people. I don't care. I'm sorry. I mean, no disrespect. I don't care how long you've been doing it. Machines are better than humans at pricing truckloads. They just are. So that's certainly one. And then the other is based around the selection of carrier and load. Humans can just see bigger swaths of data. They can do things in larger sets and move them more quickly. So if you have that as your technological backbone, and you layer on top of that humans who are fantastic at working with shippers and working with carriers and helping them embrace the technology and not have friction with it. How do you talk to a 58-year-old truck driver about downloading a mobile app? It's an interesting conversation. And at its core, it has to be, this is to your benefit. If we're forcing somebody to do something because our shipper wants it or because it's part of our platform, we all know how that's going to go. You have to have a credible case that this is genuinely in your Mr. or Mrs. truck driver's interest. And when that's the case, which, frankly, we believe strongly it is, all of a sudden you get this harmonious circle. And you certainly have to get over that initial, you want to track me? Who are you? Are you Big Brother? And it's like, no, it's just 2019. And you have a $200,000 truck and a $200,000 worth of cargo, and Nike wants to know where the sneakers are. That's the reality. But the reality for you is, here's how we can use that to put more money in your pocket. And all of a sudden, when you make it about them, there's understanding. So we focus heavily on ensuring the machines do what the machines are good at, and people do what people are good at, and you ultimately get a better solution for everybody.
Parker, what do you think about the question? How well do you think AI can replicate or improve upon human decision making?
Absolutely. So as I think about it, it's not human or machine. It's always human and machine. And to do another non-transportation analogy, in the 80s and 90s, the pinnacle of artificial intelligence became playing chess. And, it took 20, 30 years for the IBM community to finally beat a grandmaster. But for decades before that, the leading chess algorithm plus any old, expert player adding in their own intuition could beat a grandmaster every time. And so it's about finding effective ways to combine the two. And as I think about how we deploy this out into the industry, the last three generations of technology being desktop, web and mobile, that was all humans learning to speak computer. It's logging in, authenticating, form submit. That's a lot of asks. And one of the beautiful things about AI is it's actually the most human-friendly generation of technology. It is computers learning how to speak human. And so, I respect, Drew's approach of trying to get that 58-year-old driver to download an app and authenticate and share location services so he can track them every 60 seconds. Definitely adds value. But our approach is a little bit different. And instead of, trying to get people to opt in and share all their information and authenticate and submit a form, we'll use our truck rank algorithm to, identify where a carrier might be acting, and we'll predict, hey, this person might be a good match for, Jacksonville to Middletown, PA. And instead of reaching out to 50,000 people or 50,000 carriers who, might be a good match, we'll just send an email or text message to that, predicted carrier. Hey, y'all ever make it to Jacksonville? And they just can respond, yes, no, they're 3 times a week. And it's a very light touch. And it doesn't take any training. It doesn't take a phone call to educate that person on how to respond to an email of the question, y'all ever make it to Jacksonville? And so, I am hopeful for AI to be the generation of technology that really moves the needle in our industry, because AI can learn transportation instead of trying to force transportation to learn technology.
Tony, what do you think about replicating human decision-making with AI?
Yeah, I think we're definitely in a unique space where the skill sets of machines and humans really complement each other. And there are definitely tasks, like Drew touched upon, where AI is really suited to make the final decision, be the final decision maker in these tasks. But there are definitely tasks where AI is not the right decision maker. And like Drew touched upon, the tasks that can be categorized as suitable for AI are the tasks that are repeatable, that involve a lot of data backing each decision. So tasks such as pricing, carrier assignment. And the tasks that need humans, that need a human touch, are those that have, involve empathy, that are one-time exception management situations. And I think ultimately, these are the tasks that brokers want to work on. And I think if there are any reps in the room here with me, can agree to this, that, customers or carriers or brokerages are hiring well-qualified, college-educated employees with degrees. And I think their skill sets are really underutilized if 90% of the time they're reading emails or reading spreadsheets or having to call tens of carriers for each load. And I think this is where machine learning and AI comes in and really helps improve the quality of life for your reps.
Matt, you want to comment on it?
Sure, I'll just be quick. So we're serving a couple hundred brokers, and probably those brokers are running a few 100,000 payables transactions through HubTran every week. And so we look at statistics about human accuracy versus HubTran accuracy, and invariably HubTran is more accurate in these kind of rote tasks than human beings are. So, we focus in a fairly narrow prism, which is back office work. And if you think about, one transaction for a broker, hundreds every day, where, you get this paperwork coming in and you have to, kind of index all these documents, and you have to check for discrepancies, whether it's a missing document, a missing reference, an unexpected charge, the remit to is off, whatever. It's very easy for people to miss that. And, our statistics show that the machine does a better job. So, there are certainly things where, judgment's required. Our work tends to focus in the areas where, there's a bit less judgment and, more repetitiveness.
So I'm just going to try to bring this to earth a little bit. So what we're really talking about is any repetitive task in a freight brokerage operation, basically what everybody's saying is can be automated.
I'd go further than that. Yeah. Anything like that will be automated very soon.
So things like track and trace.
For sure.
Pricing, load matching, data entry of any form into a TMS. What else? What are we missing?
POD retrieval and scanning to make sure it's clean POD and archiving.
Okay. So when you think about this, think about your own operations and what your people are doing. And if it was automated to this level that we're talking about, what it would mean from a staffing point of view, right? From a staffing point of view, and then also from a compensation point of view, because when we get involved in strategy work, that comes up, right? If all of a sudden you're currently compensating carrier salespeople at 15% of gross margin or something, what happens when they don't have to do the work to justify that compensation? That's why this is so disruptive, as you can see, right? What's going to happen, especially on the carrier sales side, what's going to happen in terms of staffing needs and in terms of how you compensate the people that are going to be there to handle basically the one-off exceptions.
The way we think about it is any load that I would call an easy load, right? Pick it up in New Jersey, running back into Chicago, right? Any easy, no-touch freight should not have any variable human cost associated with it 95% of the time. Of course, there will be an exception. The driver will say, my truck burst into flames, and then you'll have to, of course, be involved. But 95% of the time, that load should literally be tendered, matched, dispatched, routed, tracked and traced, paid and billed without any human ever being involved. You should have literally zero variable cost associated with that load. And in our world, at least, the job of the carrier rep at that point is not to negotiate and be the bad guy and beat them down for $50. Right. That's the job of the system. The job of the carrier rep is to help them be friends with the carrier, right? Here's the thing, man. You need an extra $50. Well, you haven't tracked it, more than 90% the last 3 loads. Your compliance scores are going down, and therefore your payable is going down. Help me help you. It makes the conversation much more effective because the carriers don't feel like they're just getting pushed. And of course, the humans are still maintaining the relationship and making sure the carrier is getting maximum ROI onto the platform. Because if we're not generating ROI for the carriers, we're going somewhere else. So it's got to be both sides.
So traditionally in domestic transportation management, we have managed transportation, which tends to be very automated, right? Those are the large accounts, network transportation management, 5 to 7% gross margins. What we're talking about today is more transactional business, which we're going to automate to the point where it's almost from a process standpoint, almost like managed transportation. So I see that as a very interesting trend and a pretty disruptive trend. So should we go on to the questions? Let's ask this. So, we're talking a lot about the future. I know a lot of this is going on currently, but why does this generation of technology, AI, have a chance to make an impact when the last 3 desktop, web, mobile technologies kind of struggled to get adoption? So, who wants to tackle that one first? Throw that out there.
Yeah, so, as I was kind of talking about, AI is familiar. AI is, meeting your customer and your carrier on their terms. So, instead of, reaching out to a carrier and saying, hey, what you're doing is wrong, your chalkboard, your, magnets on the board is wrong, do it a different way. AI can seek to learn about their process and figure out, where it can enhance their existing workflows. It can allow them to use their own set of tools and, be able to draw across, kind of all, these, different processes. And, so much of AI is passive, recommendations and data collection versus a more active approach. And so, another AI kind of example, when we think about matching patterns and just enhancing your current workflow. So we think a lot about data supply chain, and data supply chain is how you intake, leverage, and structure your data. And so it's not about just the scale of the information, or the scale of the data, it's really about the quality of it. So the best example that I can give you is, let's compare Walmart and its $400 billion worth of success data of transactions versus Amazon and its paltry $200 billion. But think about the granularity and structure of that information. So a customer walks down an aisle at Walmart, they're glancing at different packages, they pick up one, they pick up another one, and then they take the third one to check out. And so, yes, Walmart knows that person, bought that particular type of oatmeal, but they don't know why they put the other 2 back. Now, compare that to Amazon, and customer spends 30 seconds on one page, Then they go spend 30 seconds on the next page. And then finally they spend 10 seconds on the last page where they click buy now. And Amazon, through the relationships, was just able to figure out that user was gluten-free, and they're able to, make improvements to those search results the next time they come back to the page. The user didn't do anything differently. They just looked at different products and they bought a product. But passively, the systems were able to learn about their preferences and enhance those particular behaviors. So AI in our industry, has a chance to make all of our lives more efficient, all of our lives reduce those empty miles, reduce that repetitive work without us having to have those pains of change.
Anybody got anything to add to that?
I would just say technology gets adopted when it works. That's why I'm trying to swear off any buzzwords, right? Can you explain it in a way that somebody who may not be a technologist goes, oh, yeah, that sounds like it would be better if you did that. And if you describe things that sound better, curious humans go, well, let's explore that. And if it works, they do more of it. And if it doesn't work, they kind of stop, right? And so, we, especially in this business, I remember the days of RFID, right? We have a tendency occasionally to overhype things. And that's okay, because I think we all know intuitively that things can be better. And I think we all want ways to make it better, not just for ourselves, but literally for all the touch points. So that to me is really the answer. If the technology as conceived creates value, people will do more of it. And if it sucks, they'll stop. It's really as simple as that. Mm-hmm.
And the way I see it, AI is a tool, just like any other technology tool you may be using right now in your company. And tomorrow there may be another tool that's better than AI, but we're all here today because we think AI is making a big impact within our organizations. And I think as brokerages operate in the next few years, similar to how Google operated in the late 90s and early 2000s. So what Google did was they really made a mission to go out and collect, organize, and sort through all of the internet's information. And the result of that is today we all have Google as a tool in our pockets. It's an assistant that helps make our lives better and makes us smarter. So I think in the coming years we'll see brokers be empowered with a plethora of AI tools that they can use at their disposal to make themselves smarter and work more efficiently.
I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll open it up to the audience. I think it's important because it seems like AI is a kind of a quick fix and an easy thing to deploy, right? But we all, those of us that have worked with it know it isn't. I guess what are the prerequisites before you implement AI in your company? And Tony, you want to tackle that one first because you've done a lot of it?
I think there are really 3 pillars that support any successful AI implementation. And the first one is, we've touched on this a lot already, is having good data. And by good data, that means having clean data, good quality data that's up to date, coming in real time, data that is accessible. What we've seen that is common even in the largest brokerages, and we've seen this from our time working together, Evan, is that brokerages usually have a common place where they store all their data, which is either their TMS or another data warehouse or in their track and trace solution. And this data, although it does a really good job of storing the data, it's not really accessible to use via API or other means, so that AI can really learn off of this data. And so brokerages really need to start, taking control and taking ownership of their own data, because it is your data and you should be able to use it however you want. The second pillar that is really necessary is just having technical expertise within your organization that really understands AI. And this sounds kind of obvious, but similar to how AI is not an out-of-the-box solution, it's also not a one-size-fits-all solution. There are so many different machine learning models that can solve different problems, and someone really needs to go in and look at, the data that you have and the problems that you're trying to solve and see kind of where the intersection lies, where the intersection is where AI can come in and kind of provide solutions. And the last pillar that we see is really important for companies that are implementing AI for the first time or that are new to artificial intelligence. And this is what we call in the machine learning world as having a human in the loop. So this is someone within your organization who really understands the business processes that you're trying to make more efficient. And their job is to just monitor the AI and make sure that every decision that comes out that it's making is either correct or incorrect. And by doing this, you're really ensuring that, you're not implementing an AI solution company-wide and having it muck up everything from the get-go. And even, companies such as when I was at Facebook, they developed a world-class facial recognition algorithm called DeepFace. It's a terrible name. But it really was the best. It was able to recognize any face in any picture with 98% accuracy. But even Facebook, the leading AI company, is only able to do this with a 98% accuracy. So having a human in the loop is really a great way to kind of start small, make sure, that everything is working before scaling it up within your organization.
Anybody else want to talk about prerequisites before slamming in AI?
Sure. Well, in our case, it's pretty straightforward. Your prerequisite is that you need to have a TMS and have somebody who's willing to put a ticket in for HubTran to that TMS, and a couple weeks later, you're using AI. That's it.
Through an API. Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. Anybody else want to? Sure.
I would just say that to maybe take a little bit of a provocative stance, because why not?
Sure.
I would suggest that as we continue to move forward, 3PLs are really technology companies. The days of just thinking about we pick up and deliver from point A to point B, I think if that's the way you view the world, it's going to be an increasingly hard time. I genuinely do. And so the ability to truly embrace, even little things. My business partner, who's a true technologist, likes to joke. If you refer to your technology as your IT, that's a sign that you don't really get it. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm being honest. You have to embrace best practices in technology. It has to touch every facet of your organization. It's not like, we bought this TMS, put it in the corner, and now we're good. We've got AI. It has to be every part of what you do, how you work with customers, how you work with carriers, how you process loads. If you're not doing that, the world is going to pass you by. I just genuinely mean that. And if you're not thinking about it like that, I think it's going to be an increasingly tough road.
Yeah, and I think there's a important market aspect to what Drew's saying as well, because the valuations by investors for IT companies are like 100 times revenue. The valuations for domestic transportation management freight brokerage companies is 10 times EBITDA. So you're wondering how companies like Drew's or Convoy Uber Freight's a little different because they have the parent, can generate so much investor activity. It's because the way they're valued is different, because they're a technology company first before a 3PL.
Right. And it's to the point where I mentioned we've raised $80 million in capital. I come from a traditional brokerage, so I had to train myself to think this way. If we're not spending capital, I went to the first board meeting and I was like, all right, we kept the expenses down this quarter. And they go, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to invest in the technology. We didn't deploy this capital for you to sit and generate EBITDA. We deployed this capital for you to light the world on fire. And we're not the only ones, right? We're one of many. And so this is, I say this genuinely, the barbarians are circling all of us. And if you're not thinking about it, they're coming for your dinner.
All right. So I'm going to open it up now. Let's start with this one. What systems are you using to send pricing to a carrier? And Tony, you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, I think there are many ways to send pricing to a carrier. I think what our company is exploring with our customers are ways to automate this whole pricing and carrier engagement process. So instead of your broker having to go out and make outbound calls, make tens of outbound calls per shipment, what our platform does is we actually go out, do all the preliminary engagement for the carrier, and instead of, operating on a list of carriers that they have to call, they're actually receiving inbound qualified leads from the engagement that we've already generated for our brokers. And, this engagement includes pricing, includes, lane preferences, includes any other carrier digital fingerprints that we may be collecting on a carrier, so that a broker has real-time access to see, this is what the carrier might be thinking at this point in time.
And you want to tackle this one too, Drew, or
Sure.
Parker? Are you using systems to send pricing to carriers?
So the main technology and the system we use is the English language. Everyone understands it. It's very flexible. You can send it over email, a text message. It might be a message that comes through in an API post. It might be a phone call. But it's about meeting people and finding a universal, way to communicate. And so, yeah, we're just talking to them.
Yeah, we keep the aperture very wide on the carrier side. Everything from drivers who have opted in when they literally tell us I'm looking for a backhaul can receive, targeted notifications directly to their phone. We've got, fun things like, load lists and things like that dispatchers can go in and just click loads and assign them to drivers. The actual pricing is all generated by us internally. I mean, we're at the point when I talk about the automation of pricing, we work with a very, very large shipper where we're integrated with their TMS. And we rate somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 truckloads every hour directly in their TMS right in front of their routing guide. So their planners can go in and literally compare spot dynamic rate to the routing guide. And when they don't have to have fidelity for the routing guide, they can literally make decisions on the fly. And it's either an opportunity to save or it's an opportunity to calculate savings based on how well they did compared to the dynamic environment. So again, pricing intelligence to me is one of the absolute most critical things that we in this room can be doing and getting right.
Where does a broker start with integrating AI into their business?
Sure. I'll jump in. The first place to start is creating a culture and an environment where you can attract leading engineers. Just like Drew said, if you're trying to hire IT people, you're screwed. You need to be hiring software engineers, computer science backgrounds. Not somebody who's like built a website before or knows how to use WordPress, someone who knows Python and Java. And, those types of people, want to work on difficult, engaging problems. When I started the company 2.5 years ago, I was a little bit concerned about recruiting engineers to this industry because it's, an unsexy business. But the reality is there's so much information out there. It's such hard problems, and it's also relatable, that it's a heck of a lot more interesting to work on a transportation business than, for instance, advertising technology or, shaving milliseconds off of a transaction for a fintech company. So, before you can, implement any of these, algorithms, you need the mechanics, who understand, how to leverage these toolkits and set your organization up for success. And, creating a culture where those people are going to be respected, where they're going to thrive. Maybe it means flexible work. Maybe it means, different time off or work remote or, allowing them to work on side projects for 10 to 15% of the time. But without people, none of us can kind of move forward. And, that's the heart and the prerequisite, for all of this implementation.
Tony, you talked about 3 pillars to integrating AI into a freight brokerage operation. One of them being data, one of them being the infrastructure. I think you might be able to answer this one pretty well as well.
Yeah, I think the first place where people should start is really thinking about their data strategy. How well do you understand your customers? How well do you understand your carriers? How can you quantify the relationship that you have with your carriers? Do you really know, thousands of data points on each carrier, or are you really just basing your knowledge on, what's currently within your employees' heads? And I think the effect that you can really see once you start gathering this data is that you're really replicating your best broker across your organization. Everyone's going to have access to similar information, similar tools so that they can operate, in the most efficient manner possible.
I would take it one step further back. I think all these things are absolutely necessary, but before you even do that, I kind of hinted at this before. To me, the first thing is you have to have the correct mentality amongst the leadership of your org. And part of that, right, the easy rule of thumb of that is to say, to what degree are we old school, right? And there's certainly nothing wrong with being old school. You have to know how this stuff works. You have to be able to get on the phone with a driver and speak to them like somebody who knows how to speak to a driver. That is absolutely key. But the other key is to have sort of the other side of the world. but to have what I would call a more modern way of thinking about it and approaching problems. Again, if you look at it as, let's get some IT, okay, problem solved, we got some AI, good, that's just never going to work. It has to be in your organizational DNA how you think about these things. It has to change. It has to elevate from the transactional to the truly strategic. And if you're not doing that, I mean, you can hire the greatest engineers on the planet. They're going to be gone in 90 days. Guaranteed. They have tremendous choice and they are tremendously impatient. And so you have to Parker's point, you have to create the environment that embraces these people. And again, that doesn't mean kiss their butt. Like we are more than happy in our company to tell the engineers, you guys have gone way too far. Like calm down, let's bring it back. But again, that give and take is key, and it's valuing both the old and the new. If you're not embracing that mentality, it's going to be hard.
Great. Can you quantify the top and bottom line effect of injecting AI into your brokerage operations? And one thing, if you guys have any information on loads per person per day, that'd be interesting as well. But anyway, who wants to tackle that one? What's going to be the financial impact, the efficiency impact?
Sure. So the metric that we track is gross revenue per broker. There's a lot of different ways to think about it, whether it's loads per day, but if you look at it aggregate across the industry, I think we're all, on the same page of about $1 million has been the gross revenue per broker ceiling, maybe with some exceptions. Whether it's, a $2 billion company with 2,000 people in operations or a 500 person company doing, 500 million. And so, we have a pretty clear line of sight to 10 million in gross revenue per broker. And when it's 10 million in gross revenue per broker, even if you're at 5% margins, 10% margins, you have a lot of room to play with. So, at that top line, number, if you can increase it tenfold or even fivefold, that leaves a lot, in net. And so, currently, if you look at, public comps and probably a lot of your P&Ls, 50 to 60% of net revenues goes, to your operations team, your sales and operations team. And so, just like, Drew, we're, burning money. But, as you keep that line of sight to get that number down from 50 to 60% to 10 to 15%, at scale, it, allows you to have a lot more flexibility. And now I can't tell you what you should do with that. You can either pass it through to your carriers, with that increased margin to, make them more excited about working with you. You can charge your customers less and get more business, or, you can return, income to your shareholders. So there's a lot of different optionalities, but, as long as you can, focus on improving the, effectiveness of your team, there's a lot of different, decisions that you can make as a business owner about what to do with those new economics.
Anybody else want to chime in on that?
So our metrics are straightforward. Our freight brokers save on average about $2 a load. If prior to HubTran, there's paperwork backlogs. After HubTran, usually those go away. So if they can invoice their customers faster, and there may be a cash flow benefit. And to the extent that there's you're processing that incoming paperwork faster, you have more responsiveness and better visibility for your carriers about when they're going to get paid and if there's any issues, so there's a carrier relations benefit.
I can also add on to this. I think there are certain hard KPIs that you can be tracking throughout the whole AI implementation process, and there are certain soft KPIs that you can be tracking as well. And a few hard KPIs that we do with our customers is that we track, number of loads that we're booking per rep. We've seen, we tracked 4 reps within an organization, and they went from booking around 70 loads a month to 140 plus loads a month within the span of 3 months. Another hard KPI could be the average time needed to book a load from end to end. And certain soft KPIs can be metrics such as, more time dedicated to customer success, account management, or even, number of new relationships built with carriers. And I think these are all important to keep track of during the whole process.
The metric for us is average transaction processing time per load, right? Which is effectively a measure of how much does it cost you in human minutes to execute a load. And I don't have a purpose of comparison because this has been in our DNA since we launched the business. So I can't compare it from what it was to what it is. But I can tell you that one thing I will say in general is that I wouldn't look at anything we're talking about as a silver bullet. This should be incremental. Month 2 should be better than month 1, and month 3 should be better than month 2. It doesn't just happen. You have to, kind of focus on this and walk it down. And so we're at the point where, our average transaction processing time is, I guess I can talk about this. It's sub 30 minutes. And it's actually quite a bit lower than that. So if you take the number of hours in a day, you can kind of back into how many loads our reps are touching and things like that. And it's just continuing to grow. And of course, the results become exponential. You'll never get to 30 seconds, right? We all know that there's going to be enough exceptions that are real world driven, right? Most of our transactions are well below 30 minutes. But the one where there was a theft and the FBI is involved, et cetera, and you've got 10 hours, well, that's got to get averaged across a bunch of transactions. So your average transaction should be flowing through the system with no snags. That should really be the goal. That's certainly the way we see it.
That's good. So I guess, yeah. You got the pricing. Drew, they all want to know this question. So, we all know that drivers and dispatchers lie. These are not my words. I'm the messenger. About capabilities in order to take loads.
Yep.
How does AI ensure quality, on time, security, safety, actual availability, age of equipment, etc.?
Yep. So nothing. I would call nothing a panacea, right? So AI, at least the way I think about it, cannot actually verify the age of equipment. Now, it probably can if we really think about it, but our AI is not doing that, right? So the way we like to think about it is, the system, right, which we can call AI for the purpose of this conversation, is really the invisible guiding hand. It's supposed to ensure that what happens. And then when it doesn't, flag it so some human beings can get involved. So, we scorecard the heck out of everybody, both drivers and shippers and basically everything we can get data on, we're scorecarding. And so the classic one we get a lot of times from shippers is, well, if you're providing tracking information based on a mobile phone, what happens if a driver turns it off? I'm here to tell you, drivers do that sometimes. And it's like, and so we're very clear to say it is not perfect. This is not some magic bullet that changes everybody's behavior. But what happens is when you have a properly designed system, you get away with that one time. And you might turn your phone off and we might not track you. So then our humans are going to call your dispatcher every 15 minutes until you deliver. So if you would rather have 35 phone calls a day than having your phone on, cool, we can deal with that. But then further, the system is of course going to recognize that you're no longer in compliance. And at that point, effectively your driver and your carrier score is going through the floor. And at that point, you're either no longer welcome in the network, period, or you're on, probation and you're definitely not getting as many tenders. And when you are, you're being watched very closely. So it doesn't necessarily change behavior in that you're going to stop drivers from doing occasionally interesting driver things, but you can flag that very quickly and ensure it doesn't happen to you at least again. And we actually take that one step further because again, we're in the pockets of drivers and these phones are amazing, right? I mean, there's the hardware, there's an accelerometer, there's a gyroscope. So we're getting to the point where we can help shippers scorecard drivers and carriers based on actual driving behavior. Who speeds, who corners too hard, who brakes too hard. And I mean, right, if you're an enterprise shipper, the biggest thing on your mind is liability, right? And if we can say, well, listen, put it on a bell curve, these are the 10% of drivers who are like, maybe not acting the most responsibly with 80,000 pounds of metal. It's like, okay, well, we're willing to maybe pay 2 cents more a mile and just cut those drivers off. And we only want access to this pool of drivers. And that's sort of like segmentation and scorecarding can be applied anywhere. And that's how you ultimately coerce and drive behavior to the middle where everybody wins.
Excellent. Tony, you want to talk about how we qualify carriers too?
Yeah, I think, like Drew said, I think the biggest part of this is being able to draw patterns, draw historical trends out of the data that you do have. And I think at this point, you really need to be collecting and storing and using enough data to qualify as using, the buzzword is big data. But what big data really means is having enough data to procure trends, procure information that is relevant to your business process. And I think one way to do that is to just gather data wherever you can. Just have a variety of different data sources, including, real-time ELD data, carrier engagement data, whether they've clicked or opened an email, whether they're quoting. And I think at the end of the day, you can really reduce shipper risk and reduce the risk of carrier drop-off. If you can see, this carrier, they clicked on this email within a span of, 10 minutes. They quoted on the load. They've done a historical shipment similar to this before. And we also know, based on their ELD data, where they are. And the risk of them dropping off for this shipment is quite low.
That's a good match.
Yeah.
And listen to the data points he mentioned, and just think about how many of you are capturing those data points in your TMS currently, right? Very few. So those are the types of data points that you're going to want to have to capture if you want to go down the AI path. Is that fair? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Okay. Parker, you want to comment?
Yeah. So, artificial intelligence is not about, finding an exact answer. It's all about probability. The answer is not 42. It's 37 to 55 with a 90% confidence interval. The arrival time is not going to be, 9:57 p.m. It's going to be, 9:30 to 10:15. And, kind of be able to pull out those patterns and find outliers. Prior to, this kind of current, AI resurgence, we used to call machine learning statistical learning. Taking, hey, it's a 90% probability that this is going to happen. That's close enough to true for us to make our plans around that. And so when we think about carrier selection and carrier scorecarding, we try to look at reliable signals and say, hey, this is a reason where you should look at this person, or hey, maybe we don't need to escalate this to a human. But it's about finding those kind of outliers. So one specific example, if a carrier has been less than forthright, they might have been tracked at an inspection. That VIN number is in their inspection data. If that carrier then steals a load of copper and 3 months later they pop up at a new carrier, that VIN number is attached to a new carrier, no one else is gonna find that information. But if you can be passively tracking and saying, hey, that this is an outlier, this VIN number used to be attached to or associated with a fraudulent carrier, you might want to check in with that. But even that's not the decision. Then it might escalate to a human. They call the carrier. They say, hey, I just bought this, this trailer, 2 months ago. Okay. Well, the human needs to make that decision at the end of the day. All that this AI can do is pull out the pattern, call your attention to it, and, deliver that recommendation to an expert, who can, weigh the trade-offs of whether or not, they bought the trailer 2 months ago is a believable story. That's going to have to be a human call. So.
Your comment about probability, I think is very smart. It's understanding when things are outside the norm, and to your point, flagging them for human interaction. So I'll give you one very quick example. We picked up a load in Maryland running to Georgia, and so the guy supposedly, right, should be on 95. The system is tracking what's his ETA, and he was never behind schedule. But the system recognized he wasn't on 95. He was taking back roads. And the system said, that's very abnormal. We're just at zeros and ones. We have no idea why. But there should be a human looking at this because this is fucking weird. And what it actually turned out was the driver left the trailer in the hood. He left the trailer in the hood overnight to see if we had low jack on it because the next day he was coming to take it. And we saw it, and we literally had a private investigator sitting in a car a block away watching the trailer because there was no reason that trailer should be parked in the hood. And that's the type of thing that if you're just looking at ETA, it's like, no, he's on time. but the system knew that there was something very outside the norm with what was happening, and it said, human beings, look at this. And then, of course, it took, one person who's got 5 minutes of experience to go, I know what's happening here, and we dealt with it. But like, those are the types of human-machine synergies that are pretty damn cool.
Great. Okay, well, it looks like we're out of time. I just wanted to thank our panel. You guys did a great job.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone.